I can be very loud. So thanks. Yeah. So quick. I mean, the only thing I would add to the background there is just that in retrospect, in thinking about the things I've done, I've realized that there's a real theme, and this is probably true for many of us, to the things that I did, that there is a lot of hardware and software and interaction and sorts of things that really attracted me to virtual reality long ago. Some of you, or most of you, don't know, there are very few of you in this room who would know that my life and everything I've done has been very much shaped by this sort of dual personality that I have from my mother and my father being a very accomplished musician and my mother being a mathematician and computer programmer. And so she's German heritage and my father's sort of French-Irish, and yeah, I hear some music somewhere. So the funny thing is, and this is what people don't know, when I graduated from Purdue, I had 3 or 4 job offers. I turned them all down, and I went to New York City to work for a music production company to do audio stuff for live performance. So I worked on at that point in time, the international tour for Peter Gabriel, the SO tour, to help him set up the audio. You'd think I'd know how to fix this, right? It's been a long time. It's been a very long time. And so worked on the beginning of the SO tour a little bit. This is what Peter Gabriel looked like at that time. And then I also worked on the rig for The Cure when they were going out on their world tour at that time. And this is what The Cure looked like at that time. A little more interesting. All right, so then I decided it wasn't a life for me. Literally hopped in my car, drove from New York City to Los Angeles, and started working for NASA, and haven't looked back. All right, so what I want to talk about today, though, is a bunch of stuff that I want to make sure I give some credit to other people that I work with, including, Garrett is here somewhere in the audience, Professor Garrett Bruder, my closest collaborator now. So a lot of the things I talk about today are in some way involve contributions of work from these various people and these funding agencies. All right, so this is something that I realized I was telling Garrett before my talk. It's a little bit of a risk here what I'm going to talk about because I have thought about it for a long time, but I've never tried to put it into words. So now I'm going to put it in words and pictures, and we'll see how it goes. I don't have any demonstrations for you. I am the only demo, so I hope I won't break during the talk. All right. So David Blaine, anybody here know who he is? A few people know who he is. All right, I want to show you just a little quick, sort of an AR-ish like demo from David Blaine. And the audio on this clip is the lowest of all the clips that I have. So hopefully it'll be okay. You might have to listen carefully.
A book. We're going to try something with the book. Since it's your book, this is kind of interesting, I think. Think of, how old are you? 30? Let's try to think of Megan. Let's not use Megan's whole name. Let's use her initial, M, okay? So let's just visualize that letter, okay? And now I want you to, as you're turning to page 30, for one page for each year, you're just going to hold the book out. I just don't want to be near. Hold it outwards a little bit. Turn to page 30, and you're going to feel something and see something happen.
Oh my God.
See
Oh my God.
So I've never seen him in person. I don't know if any of you have.
And that's Megan.
But the thing that always fascinated me about him is the magic that he does, like most magicians, appears to be reality. I'm not there with them, but it's real. That's what makes it so fascinating. When we put on, virtual reality headgear, the magic that happens there is maybe less magical in some ways because we know we're conscious that we put something on. We've done all this stuff to get ready for this experience. So yes, it's going to be different. So why do what's magical about VR and AR? It's that we can basically do anything. Most of what we do, not all of it, is compatible with real world things. It doesn't have to be, but most people and most things they do are in some way compatible with it. We can do almost anything you want, like I said before. What I find interesting, I've been thinking a lot about, is the sense of what, and I'm going to touch on this throughout my talk, what it means to have a virtual reality experience and why that is so distinct from our real world experience, and why is that, and do we want that, and why is that? But it really makes it, I'm thinking of VR in some sense as being very close to magic, and I'm thinking about it in several ways, in the way it's practiced and the way it's done. So one way I've been thinking about it is every time you want to use some VR, typically somebody has to be given the crown and somebody has to be given the scepter, and they're allowed to do the thing, and nobody else can kind of do it. They're group VR experiences, but there's still this sense that you have to be chosen and given the opportunity to do this virtual experience. And that was true in the very beginning, from Ivan's, from the first time that Ivan and his students built a head-mounted display system, MIT and then Utah in the late 60s. And it's still true today. So hopefully this video is not too loud.
Come on in. So we're going to show you some virtual reality today. It's really hard to show people what it's like to be in virtual reality without having them try it for themselves. Filming you in the green screen studio is just the best way we found to help everyone else understand what it's like to be in VR. Any questions?
Can I go first?
Yeah, one person gets
All right, go crazy.
And it's magical for that person and everybody else to sit back and kind of, watch what it is. And it's pretty good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's not good.
I love it. Yeah, go get it. He actually gets it. Come on. Oh, you're so cute.
So I've been thinking now about what is it that's been sort of, I'd say, bugging me? Maybe bugging's a little strong, but the thing I've really been thinking about is why is it in our discipline that it seems like, in our many disciplines, we tend to have, and I'm going to touch on this later, almost tribes or groups of individuals who work together and focus on something and sort of exclude everybody else. And it's sort of my tribe and your tribe, and we don't necessarily work together, we don't necessarily think across tribes and things like that. And so we have this, I call it the purification of the disciplines. It's almost a self-fulfilling convergence of those groups of researchers over many years. So some of this special status I think about as being inherent in the way we think about ourselves and the things we do. So those of us who practice VR, do research in VR. When I say VR and AR, I mean broadly HCI related things, user interaction. So we're sort of the wizards, we know how to do it, and everybody else, they're sort of muggles and they don't have any idea what's going on, and we have to kind of show them how to do it, and we're special. We think of ourselves as maybe a little special. We may not consciously think about it that way, but we do think about it a little bit that way. So it's also inherent in the way we think about things. This is something that really struck me, is many of you would know this, this continuum, but what's interesting to me is, here's virtual and it's way far away from real. And so people will get into, arguments over where does my work fit in this particular in this particular framework. Does it fit way down here? Is it over here? And people argue about where it is. So we think inherently, at least in this construct, about placing our work somewhere in here instead of allowing it to be necessarily many places at once, which some people would call mixed reality, but I still think we're classifying it, and I'm not someone who loves classifying things. I recognize that classifying things is useful at times, absolutely, but I don't like myself to limit, I don't want our thinking to be limited by the way we classify things. So this, this has happened, and it continues to happen in this way. And again, I'm not saying it's a gloom and doom and bad thing, but I'm just thinking about it. We have all of these different research communities, we have our different journals, we have our different conferences, and these tend to sort of, I think, sort of solidify and converge ideas and thinking in those areas. I'll touch on this again later, but right, there's a sense sometimes of, if I'm a reviewer for SIGCHI, I'd say, oh, well, this doesn't belong here. This belongs somewhere else. And so we're inherently partitioning things and spreading them apart so that they fit in those particular domains. But in doing so, I'm a little concerned that we may be limiting our thinking. So we've seen this sort of thing before. This is a little silly, but I wanted to go back and think about, right, in the beginning of the forming of the Earth, right, there were no humans, eventually there were humans, and we're just a bunch of humans just walking around, right? Humans just migrated all over the Earth and kind of settled down in different places, and at some point, right, they started building communities, families, communities, larger communities, and building up nations. So now we have our individual countries, and we each belong to a country, right? And not your country, my country. So we're all separated in that way. We even have our sports teams. I'm not too into sports, but I thought some people here might be, right? And so we're going to root for our team. The other team's evil, and we think about in that sort of clannish way, or that tribe-ish way. So in the beginning, of course, when people started doing, maybe in the 60s, VR, AR-ish sort of things, we didn't have these distinct research communities. We're just people doing research in that area. right? And then over time, some people started saying, I want to work on head-mounted displays. Other people said, I want to work on the user interface parts. Other people said, I want to work on displays. And so they, kind of divided up. And so now we have, and this is just a short sampling of a few conferences some of you might know about and how long roughly they've been going on. And so you can see across these, when you look at them, that there is some duplication. I mean, many of us who participate a lot in like VR and ISMAR and even SUI and 3DY when it was around in VR, there's clearly a lot of overlap. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but there's still these distinct communities. And of course, we in this HCI domain aren't alone in this respect, right? There are people, if you look, for example, at the whole previous session, I thought was awesome, because wearables and robotics here at SUI as a part of this is exactly what I'm going to be talking about at the end of my talk about bringing those things in, which I think is wonderful. Whether they're curated or whether they just happen by chance, I still think it's fantastic. So, right, there's just a few wearable conferences, organizations. Gets a little more hairy if you go look at, for example, robotics. Okay, these are current robotics conferences. Just a few of them there. And what area broadly, sort of roughly related to things we do you think is the most prolific or has the most events, most conferences, most events? Christian, got it. Computer vision. When you look at computer vision, these are 2018 computer vision and image processing related events. So each one of these is their own event, their own community. They're all, thinking about what belongs in their venue and what doesn't belong in their venue. A friend of mine, University of Maryland administrator, he and I were talking about this once, and he said, disciplines are defined by their boundaries. That's what makes us who we are. We get to say what's at the edge and what's beyond what is considered part of our community and what's not. And this is where, for those of you who've served on program committees for a conference, you've probably heard reviewers or seen reviewers write things like, this isn't X, or it doesn't belong here, it belongs somewhere else. And I'm not saying that's wrong. Sometimes that is useful and has to be done, but I do, again, think about the cost of excluding some of those things. There's I think about this as it's a dual-edged sword. It's useful because it allows us to focus on common things, but I worry that it makes us a little parochial or a little nationalistic in our thinking. That is, we don't think beyond sort of where we're working at that moment, and so we may miss some bigger opportunities. All right, so here I am painting this picture of gloom and doom. We're all off in our communities and we're converging on something, and we don't want to talk to anybody else. We're just going to work on whatever it is, tracking or whatever it is. Is that going to change? It is changing. It's nothing. Everything changes, so it is changing. But I want to talk a little bit about some things I've thought about that could impact this. So what might disrupt this, and what is disruption? Of course, it's a buzzword. Everybody talks about disruptive forces. One thing I was thinking about here is disruption can occur on many scales, right? There could be global disruption, a new thing that changes the way, a new transistor, a new technology that changes the way everything's done. And it can be local. It can be in communities or in research communities or research groups, for that matter. So one trend I've been focusing on for a while and thinking about, and it's reflected in a lot of the work I've done over the past many years, in particular work with Garrett, is how it seems to me that in general, many things about VR, and I use that phrase very broadly, are becoming closer and closer to something that you would consider, or we might someday believe, is real. While at the same time, I see a lot of things happening in the real world, technological changes, things that one could think about as being virtual. Because what is virtual? Virtual is remember, this richness and flexibility allows us to do anything we want. So can we do that in the real world? Well, things maybe in the future are changing in a way that would do the same thing from the opposite direction. So I'll give you a couple of examples from my own work with Garrett and others, and things we've been thinking about here. This is something we call the wobbly table. This is a VR paper from 2016. And you think about this as just mixed reality, but that wasn't the point here. There's a real table up front, and she is virtual, and she's got a virtual table back there. And yes, when Kung Su sitting in front here moves the table, her virtual table moves, it's sensed. And now the flip side of this is she can actually move his table. So
How are you?
So the really
Nice to meet you.
Hi there.
We are going to play 20 question games.
So they play a game of 20 questions.
I'm
The important
sorry,
thing is
no.
that she is
You have to
aware
ask me
of
yes or no questions.
what's happening. She's aware when the table moves. She exhibits behaviors that she looks down when she knows, oh, he's leaned on the table. This is like when you're in a restaurant, right? And the table's wobbly and kind of bugs you and you're going to shove a napkin under it or something like that. So you think of that as a nuisance, but in this way, we did it as a contrived way to see if it could establish a social connection between you and the virtual human. And what we learned is it really makes a difference in how the users feel about her when there's this physical connection. When she is aware that the table rocks, and if she leans on it and pushes the table and you feel it, it really changes the way people feel about it. So that's the point here, not the mixed reality, but the point is about that awareness and ability to affect things. So here's another example where we used like a wind sensor hidden back in here, and we had a nice oscillating fan, not unlike the ones in the corners over here, that was blowing on the subjects as they sat here and talked to Katie. And you know, the fan was pointed away. The paper that she has would be still. When the fan moved toward it, the paper would flutter. The virtual paper would flutter, and then at some point she would notice it. She would try to like push the paper down and kind of look over at it. So again, same thing. Totally unnecessary, totally contrived. We inserted that and injected it, that connection to try and that physical virtual connection to try and cement or reinforce the relationship between those two individuals, the physical and the virtual individual. This one's a little different, but it's still the physical virtual aspect. What we did here were experiments to see if witnessing Katie, the virtual human, having a conversation with Michael, a real human, when you walk into the room, makes you feel differently about her. So again, she is aware that he is there. She appears to be aware. She's not really, obviously. She appears to be aware that he's there. He's having a high-level conversation with her. They're laughing. They're telling jokes. And then he says, oh, your visitor's here. I'll see you later. And he leaves. So now you have this sense, without us saying anything, that she is aware of what's happening in the room. She's aware of people there. And again, perhaps that she can influence it. So no surprise, again, makes a significant difference in how people feel about her. So this is physical and virtual connecting to change the way people feel about, in this case, virtual humans. So we have little gadgets we played around with a lot in these cases, little wind sensors and other little devices. And this has led me, and I'm not the only person, to think a bit about the coming of the Internet of Things. And yes, it's a cliche and all of that, but it is happening, and this is in some sense disruptive because we're not driving that, right? Could be a little disruptive to us. It's happening outside of anything we do, and there are people who think they've invented the ideas of network appliances or whatever, and they're off just, making all this stuff happen. So we could sit there and say tribally, oh, that's not our field. We don't do IoT. We just do, spatial user interfaces or VR, AR. Or we could look at this and say, wow, is this an opportunity for us? I was thinking about this as like, wherever Alex is, let's not back there. Alex yesterday was talking about activating the physical world. When he said that, I was like, oh, yeah, this is maybe a way of thinking about that. So a side effect of that, if you allow that IoT could become useful in our spatial user interfaces and in our daily AR and VR experiences, if you allow that, what that can start to do is transform the experiences that we're used to having in AR and VR, which are typically very egocentric. So I put on a head-mount display, Kyle doesn't get to see it, it's me, I get everything for me, I get the sounds, I get the sights, everything is for me, into something that is off of my head and now more into the real world. And so the sounds that I hear or the effects that happen could be happening from things in the real world. The real world objects could be sensing me, so I don't even need to have my head mount on. My dog comes in, the IoT device could sense that, and my AR agents, for example, could be aware of that when something happens. So we're looking historically at a trend that's, at least as somebody in this mindset, myself, stand back and look at these things, that heads toward that. And so one of the visions I've had for a while that Garrett and I have been formulating for a while, and is this idea of what we call augmented reality input-output devices. The idea would be that you'd have a component that's like a tracking system, but it'd be a box that you just set down in different places in the real world. And these devices would talk to each other, they would network to each other, and they would set up a sort of a separate subsystem of awareness and effectiveness. So an AR application, for example, could ask that network and say, let me know if there's motion over here, let me know if there's a sound over here, tell me where it is, tell me what it is, listen for these words, look for these actions throughout that space. And then they could also output for you. So they could provide sound, some of them could provide liquid, some of them could provide, could blow air, could do all sorts of things. So imagine a training scenario like this, training nurses and physicians. One of the difficulties in using AR or VR and something on a scale like this is everybody has to wear headbands. Everybody's running around. There's a bunch of real world stuff. There are actors who come in who just need to pretend to be the patient or pretend to be a paramedic. They don't need to wear a head-mounted display. So what we envision here is these REO or ARIO units would be spread out throughout objects. So they could make the bed shake. So even though you've got a virtual human on the bed, if you had an REO unit somewhere sitting on this stretcher while you're rolling the stretcher, if the virtual patient is supposed to be shuddering because they are having some sort of seizure, then this unit could be shaking the bed. It could be vibrating the bed a little bit. So it could provide that haptic part while your head-mount display provides the visual part. A little bit of sneezy, moist nastiness coming from a child here who sneezes on you, some vomit over here, some blood, different things. So an ability to sense. So again, if a real person somewhere waves their hand and says, I need help over here, they don't have a head-mount display, the system ought to be able to sense that, and the AR VR system ought to be aware of that. It's not right now. AR VR systems are very closed in their sort of awareness of what's going on in the world, typically. Not all, but typically. So what do I mean when I talk about the collapse? I don't mean falling apart. That's not what I meant when I talk about the collapse. I mean collapse as in wrapping around, and I'm not sure wrapping around is quite the right way to think about it. It's not satisfying to think about it as becoming a big soup of stuff that doesn't have any organization. That doesn't satisfy me either. But I am conscious again of the cost of spreading things out like this. So there are people who've thought about other continuums, other ways of thinking about this. So here's an example from Microsoft where thinking about it in more of a Venn sense, mixed reality in the middle, the real environment, the human computer, and some other things where they overlap. Some of you I know in this room know Chris Stapleton. And so here is a version of that sort of a notional diagram from Chris. And one of the things I think is unique and I think interesting here is that he includes imagination. It's a little maybe unsatisfying for some of us that it's so big because we don't control imagination. Or at least we don't think about controlling it right now. It's a whole other topic, but it's something that some people, psychologists, certain people in our field do think about when they do experiments or create experiences. They think about priming the individuals for what they're about to receive before they do it. So they try to steer them mentally into a particular place before they have the experience. So that is something you maybe could control the imagination, but it seems pretty hard. All right, so virtual becoming real. I'm just going to go back and forth on these two things a little bit. Virtual becoming real. So what does this mean? There's so many different ways that I've been thinking about this. So one is with respect to just the actual experience of doing something virtual. So has anybody in this room read this book or seen the book, aware of it? A couple of hands, people who've read the book. So one of the very first things Jeremy and Jim talk about at the beginning of the book is how virtual experiences are real experiences. They're real for that person who's experiencing it at that moment. And he also talks a lot about how, in some sense, the brain doesn't really care much about what it's processing, whether it's real or virtual, that we can be influenced in the same way. So there's a psychological or a psychology aspect of that, virtual influencing the real. Jeremy has done, for those of you who don't know, hundreds of experiments on how virtual things can affect real behavior. So things like cutting down a virtual tree with a haptic chainsaw device causes the subjects to be more, to conserve more paper towel after they leave the experiment room. How, as another example, is saving a child. He did this one experiment where you were Superman, and you put on a head-mount display and you fly through a city that's been evacuated because something bad has happened, but there's one child that nobody can find. The child is diabetic, needs insulin, you gotta find the kid. And so you do this virtual experience, you find the kid, and then afterwards, they, in a contrived way, when you're filling out the questionnaire after you've done the study, you think you're all done, you're sitting down at the table doing a questionnaire, and the researcher accidentally knocks over a bin full of pencils, and they fall all over the table and onto the ground. And it's amazing statistically how many people who had the Superman experience helped pick up the pencils compared to the people who didn't. You know, I'm involved with a couple of some of you know I've been trying to start some workshops with some other folks called VR for Good, AR for Good, kind of mix things at IEEE VR and AR, and I'm involved with some other organizations looking at VR and AR for the social good. And people think about how can we use VR and AR, and the most obvious thing people think about is, oh, show me the starving child, show me famine, show me whatever it is. And I agree, except the problem is, how do you get people to look at that? Who's going to want to look at that, right? You can't force them to. And the thing comes to mind for me is, anybody here know the movie A Clockwork Orange? Yeah. So all I can think about is the scene in Clockwork Orange where the guy's strapped in the theater and they're holding his eyelids open and making him watch, you know, these terrible videos trying to influence him. So there's a psychological aspect of this virtual becoming real. There's, of course, a visual, or, you know, this sort of traditional visual and appearance. Has anybody seen this news story? Just a few days old. I just threw this in. This is very, very new. So a little video here from Magic Leap. Let's see if this works.
Nearly 2 years ago, we had interesting progress in Micah's development. After focusing on realistic eye gaze, eye movement, and gaze, we set up Micah on our current prototype. AI components were then added to track the user and look them in the eye. Additional AI elements were added for body language and posture.
So, you know, you heard him say AI, gaze, body posture. Of course, keep in mind, an important thing is she has to be aware of your body language and your posture and what you said in order for her to exhibit things that are responsive. So, again, is there a role for broader allocentric sensing as in IoT or other devices? How can they play a role in helping our agents that are, and this is AR, this is Magic Leap. So the idea is you put on your Magic Leap goggles and you're walking through your house and, you know, she appears over here and you talk to her. Well, she has to, for it to be effective, she probably has to know what I'm doing, where I am, you know, and those sorts of things. So again, that environmental allocentric sensing may play a role. There's a physical side in terms of taking the computer graphics, so Kyle mentioned it, but there's some work I did years ago with Ramesh Raskar and others to develop something we ended up calling Spatial Augmented Reality. This is in the 1990s. So the idea was take the richness of computer graphics from these were just still from like Photoshop, still images, carefully projected onto white wooden blocks, so that suddenly the white wooden blocks look like they have color. The basic idea here was, when we see color on things, we see it because white light generally is reflecting off of something that's passing blue light back to me, so I see blue, and it's blocking the other wavelengths. But you can do the same thing by having colored light up there and having the object be white. You're just transferring where the filtering is being done. So we worked on this for a while, and I think one of the things I realize now looking back on this, and it's really hard to articulate for those of you who've done any work in this area, it's a very weird and special feeling to be in front of something without any head-mount display on or anything that is changing color and changing maybe apparent shape, and things are changing about it right in front of you. It is really a compelling feeling, and I'm not saying that just because I had something to do with it. It just feels different, and it's very hard to convey to somebody who's never felt this or experienced it what it feels like. But I'm telling you, that combination of off of me in the field, dynamic virtual things happening is compelling. So we're using this now for a lot of other things. People use the concept or the paradigm all over the world. We're doing patient simulators, so we've got projectors and cameras and things and touch sensing going on in the patient here. So nurses, these are a couple of our Garrett and my colleagues, Desiree and Mindy, who are nursing, pediatric nurse professors. And so they can walk up and touch the patient, and it's got touch sensing built into it, these curved surfaces, so you can do things like pull down on the lip or pull down on the eyelid or tickle him or do whatever you want to the kid. It's got temperature control all over the body, so we can change the temperature of his head, his hands, things like that, provide pulse and breathing sounds and all sorts of things. happy to talk to anybody who wants to about that more offline. It's an exciting thing for me. I don't know how many of you know about this. Has anybody in this room ever seen this work? Do you know of this work? A few people? All right, so this idea of passive haptics. And I don't know that Fred and Brent Insko and Mary Whitten were among the first to do this, but the first I'm aware of. So they went out and very carefully measured Fred Brooks's kitchen in his house, very carefully modeled it in computer graphics, modeled all the surface properties, did everything they could at that time. This is in the 1990s. And then went and bought a bunch of styrofoam blocks and some masonite, wood, and created a crude physical representation of that same space and would walk around in it. And so you would feel, if you reached out and there was a virtual countertop, you would actually feel something there. So that was sort of satisfying. I don't know that you could lean on it, but you would feel it there. An interesting thing from this was, one of the outcomes of their research was that the visual sense of shape in the cases that they tested seemed to capture or overcome your tactile sense of shape. Maybe not that surprising because our hands are pretty low fidelity, but if you see something that looks to you curved and you feel it and it's not curved, your sense is that, at least in their studies, was that it's curved, even though it didn't feel like it. If you took the head mount off and you felt it, you'd say, oh, that's a sharp edge. So that was kind of a cool idea. They went on and did this, and I'm sure many of you know about the pit experiment. The one was originally done at UNC, and again in the 1990s, but then been done all over the world. Some of you may not know or may not have seen. How many in here have seen, or how many have done a pit experiment? Actually done the demo. Okay, most everybody in here. So something that was really cool that they did here was, for those of you who don't know, so here's the virtual room. Subjects would walk into this virtual room, they had a head mount display on, the door would open, they did some stuff, they'd step out here, and you kind of see here, there's an opening here, and you can see down, that's the pit. You can see down to the room down below here, and you were given a task. You had to walk out on this little ledge right here, that little like diving board, which is what this is, and look down, and you had to drop a ball onto a target. And it's the vection, the motion parallax is very powerful as you're standing there, and you move your head just a little bit. This whole downstairs thing is moving a lot, and for most people, it's pretty, it gets your attention. The thing they did that pushed people over the edge, so to speak, pardon the pun, was to add a plywood structure around here that was maybe 3 centimeters tall or something like that. And so the people walking on it, first of all, they stepped off carpet onto the wood, so it felt different to their feet. And then when they get to the edge of it, they could feel over the edge with their foot, and it matched what they would see. So what they measured was heart rate and a skin, galvanic skin response and several other things, and could see some significant increases in people's heart rate as they felt, and sweat when they felt that edge. Again, bringing the physical and the virtual together and spreading it out into the real world a little bit. So really spreading it out. I don't know how many of you have seen these, but theme parks in general are doing a lot of this, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But you can do this yourself now as a consumer if you want. If you haven't.
When you use virtual reality at home, you're always trying not to touch anything. Your real-world surroundings, the thinking goes, break the illusion of VR. But it turns out that if you merge the two things, you end up with an experience that's far more immersive. At the Void, a quote, hyper-reality facility, they're melding state-of-the-art VR tech with real-world physicality, and in doing so, they're leading a wave of location-based VR. It's a little bit video game, a little bit laser tag, and feels more like an actual adventure than anything else on the market.
And we have fire.
And bringing it back to magic, to what is the magic? There's magic in multiple respects here.
But for all this tech, hyperreality actually uses some old-school magic theory.
Virtual reality, in its truest sense, is a form of magic. Magic is just creating a new reality for people, using the tools that are available, whether that's picking up a coin and using sleight of hand to make someone think, even if it's just for a second, that coin could vanish. That's a little reality that you were able to create for them. VR is the same way. We're trying to create new realities that people believe in. So it makes sense to use magic principles to take that to its furthest extent and really get people embedded and immersed in these worlds.
What I really love about that is, and I live in Orlando, so you have Disney World there and Universal Studios, but those, one of my closest friends works for Disney, those teams of people, the people who develop the experiences there, they don't care. They're not, they're not bigots about, oh, it's not VR, or it's not this, or it's not. They don't care. They'll use any trick, they'll use magic, they'll use deception, they'll use everything they can to give you the experience they're trying to give to you, to make you afraid, to make you happy, to make you, smile, to make your kids happy. And so I really love that, and I'm conscious of the fact that a lot of times when we do things in the academic community, we frown on these sort of tricks that people would play, or something that isn't intellectually deep, or something like that. It doesn't fit. It's not VR. It's something else. So it doesn't belong. So again, is there a cost to us doing that? Is there a place for people to do that and think about it and pursue those particular things? Okay, so that was virtual becoming real. I want to cover a little bit of real becoming virtual. So what do I mean by this? I mean, as I said earlier, virtual I think of as mostly richness and flexibility of things to happen. We can do that with head-mounted displays, right? But where do you see this happening now in the real world things? You see it happening, one example is in robotics. So I get a little film here from Boston Dynamics, just short. That's good, because I was watching you guys when that happened. It's interesting, several people around were like, oh, and you feel bad. It's like he kicked a dog or something, right? That's what it looks like. It's really cruel. Of course it's not, and he's demonstrating how stable it is, but it is interesting to me that this thing that's mechanical and physical is in some sense becoming more virtual, in that it can do things that it couldn't do before. It can climb and go places that, 10 years ago even, we didn't think of robots doing those sorts of things. You don't have to be, have $1 million to buy something. You can go out to your toy store and buy Cosmos. My kids love playing with them. So you can start to think about, how could this impact me in the work that I do? How could I make use of these sorts of robots? Is there a place, or what problems could we solve together if we thought about this? And you can start thinking about adding, remember I showed you the spatial augmented reality a little while ago. So what if you have this robotic thing, but
we'll all be empowered and mercifully served.
But you can change the appearance of it. Also, Disney's been doing this for a while. Little buzz here, moving around. So his animated face, again, rich and flexible, but his body is also rich and flexible. So it's a combination of those two things. Some of you here I know have seen Sphero. Does anybody here remember? I remember an Ismar, Christian, anybody else, that when this was a
Today
demo.
we want to introduce you to something really special we've been working on,
Yeah.
and it's called Sharky.
Nobody else does.
We've been working on augmented reality technology for Sphero for over a year now, and we're just about to
right, not projected imagery, but
Sphero
now
augmented
tablet-based
reality
or
technology is
camera-based
different than
AR.
other
There's this
augmented
thing
reality
moving
technology
around.
in that you don't have to use a printed out
It's being
marker.
tracked and it's
In
being
the past,
overlaid
a lot
with
of augmented
the,
reality has been all about introducing external
virtual
markers
imagery.
into the scene. In the case of Sphero, this marker is a robot.
This AR marker isn't stationary. It isn't on a piece of paper that's stuck on the ground. This AR marker can actually move around and drive around, and you can walk around your entire house and play an augmented reality game.
The reason why Sphero is so special is because we can put this character in your living room and you can move him around and interact with him in the real world, and this has just never been done before.
So you think about it, and it's like, if I turn off the video and just listen to what he said, I might tend to think, oh, well, I could do that right now with AR, I can do it with anything else. So why is this different? What's different about it being a robot? And I'll give you one example. One example is my cat is lying here on the floor sleeping, and Sphero comes by. My cat's gonna get up and jump out of the way, which is gonna change the way how I feel about this virtual thing that's flying through the room, right? Instead of the virtual thing passing right through my cat's gonna freak out and scream and run somewhere else, which I'm not trying to be mean to my cat, but just saying other things will react to this, and it will be in a non-computer vision way sensitive to floor height, bumps, things like that as you go through it. So again, back to some work that Garrett and I and some others have been doing that's related to this, thinking about why does the physical thing matter? Does the physical thing matter? Does the physics or the shape of the environment or the relationship to the environment matter? So I'm not going to go deeply into this, but some recent experiments we did, and this is at ISMAR next week being presented, but looking at So Amazon Echo or Google Home or Apple HomePod or whatever, right? So it's just a voice. I think the movie Her, you guys seen the movie where the guy falls in love with her. What was her name? The actress, Scarlett Johansson. So anyway, so the idea here is you ask your Echo, Alexa, please turn on the light. And so Alexa turns on the light. And you go, okay, fine, that's great. Or versus you ask her to turn on the lamp and you see somebody there representing Alexa, kind of like the Magic Leap video I saw earlier. So you see an assistant. And another condition we had was she pulls out a device and she taps something and the light goes on. Okay, thank you. The third condition was you see her and you say, please turn off the light. And she goes, okay. And she walks over to the light. And again, using IoT, right? She appears to turn off the light. She does. She turns off the light. The light goes off. So the question is, how does that affect people? Well, it turns out it doesn't matter so much when the light's in your room, but think about when the thing you ask for is outside, you can't see it. So how do you feel about it then? Well, as it turns out, it makes a big difference if she leaves the room, appears to leave the room, even though it's no purpose, right? The light's been turned off. But if it looks like she leaves to do something and comes back, you trust that it's done more than you ever did before. So it matters in this case. Here's an example of similar to that, where we did an experiment looking at privacy. So if it's just the voice agent, then right, there's a lot of privacy stuff in the news about like really Echo and other units, right? Collecting all the speech all the time, processing it off somewhere in the world and stealing your life secrets, whatever they may be. I don't know, my life's boring. But anyway, so so there's one thing if you don't see anything, but what if you see her and she says, okay, and she says, I'll give you a few minutes of privacy, sure. And she appears to put on headphones and like sits there listening to music. So now do you believe more that she really is not listening? Or is she there and then she leaves the room? She says, okay, I'm gonna leave, yell when you're ready and I'll come back. And it turns out, again, people are more trusting that she's not listening when she physically appears to leave, or then when she just says, okay. So, and this may be a vestige of our real worlds now. Maybe, future generations won't worry about it. It won't be a big deal for them. But that's an example where it matters. So this is something, this sort of melding of robots and AR and VR and HCI and user interfaces is something that I and others, many people have been thinking about for a long time, but in particular I've been thinking about it was thinking about it a few years ago with a group of people, 18 years ago, wow, 8 years ago, in a big grant proposal, a big team we put together to work on this, and it was the advantage of sometimes, for those of you who haven't written grant proposals, students who will be writing them, it's a pain in the neck, it's I think what somebody called soul sucking, which I agree, it is soul sucking, draining. On the other hand, it forces you to think about things, articulate them, write them down, and sometimes what comes out of that lives on. You go somewhere else with it, and this has lived on. This is an effort that wasn't successful from a funding standpoint, but a lot of things lived on about it. One of the coolest things about it that I loved was we were thinking about these primitives sort of being these like robotic building blocks. You've probably seen many of these. I'll show you one here in a minute. But these little robotic things that can reassemble, self-assemble. What if they could self-assemble, and what if they could change their appearance using shader lamps or something else in some way? And so that was the kind of thing we were thinking about there. Many people since this time have started. UPenn, these guys were some of the first. Here's a recent clip from MIT.
Our objective is to design self-assembling and self-reconfiguring robot systems. These are modular robots with the ability of changing their geometry according to task. And this is exciting because a robot designed for a single task has a fixed architecture, and that robot will perform the single task well, but it will perform poorly on a different task in a different environment. If we do not know ahead of time what the robot will have to do and when it will have to do it, it is better to consider making modular robots that can attain whatever shape is needed for the manipulation, navigation, or sensing needs of the task.
So these she's showing are static in color. Imagine that they could change color at least. Imagine they could actually put imagery on the side. Imagine that you could have, and there are people who've done, I forget the name of it, but there was a group in Japan who did like lenticular displays. They did a cube. So it was an auto stereo cube, and you could look at it. So you couldn't see things outside the cube, but you could perceive things inside the cube. You could move it around. So a lot of interesting things maybe you could do here. All of changing the appearance of, and think about, by the way, you need user interface elements, right? This thing could reconfigure to whatever's appropriate at that time. It becomes a stick, it becomes a circle, becomes whatever it needs to be at that moment for you to do whatever it is you need to do. Changing color, changing appearance, all that takes energy, it's view dependent, it's all these things. So what we were thinking about, and we're not the first people to think about this, there are more groups starting to pick this up, but it turns out this is again the advantage of trying to get outside of your silo. I hate that cliche word, but again, out of our tribe into other groups. So there are people in material sciences who are studying how, for example, butterflies and cuttlefish and other animals change their appearance with no apparent energy or very low energy. And so in the case of butterflies, it has to do with this nanostructure of the materials in their wings, and that when you look at them very closely, they reflect or refract certain wavelengths of light, and that's how we see color. So there are people actually developing nanomaterials that you can apply a current to and change the nanostructure such that it changes the light properties. So you basically can make a display that's static. They're working on dynamic ones. The ones I know are static, where you can apply a voltage and suddenly here on the table, it's a different wood pattern. And it is real, it is as real wood pattern as real wood. It's not real wood, but I look at it with a flashlight or move around in different ways and you're going to, those aren't the protesters, are they? They're coming closer. So the structure of this has changed so that it actually has those colors. It's not an emissive display creating those colors. So I love that, and I still wonder if there's something there to be done. All right, so now a little silliness here. Anybody been to Orlando before, besides Garrett? A few others, I know. Anybody been to Disney World or Universal there? Okay, anybody seen Harry Potter stuff? Oh, a couple of you, fantastic. All right, Steve, all right, so I'm gonna show you just a little bit here. Think IoT, robotics, and think, making physical things virtual or virtual things real, either way. This is a really fun experience. So you show up, you get this map. You have to pay a lot of money to get into the park, of course, but you're in Diagon Alley. Go to Ollivander's wand shop. The whole ceremony you go through, and they'll pick out a wand for you, just like in the movies, like Harry Potter. Lots of cool stuff happens when you're in the wand shop. Now you have your wand.
Would you care to take a sip of a frog?
So she's moving her wand, which is causing these things to happen. So there's something sensing what she's doing, then there's something actuated in response to that in the real world. I love that. Funny story about this. If you go to Universal Studios to Diagon Alley, you will see people walking around who look like employees. They look like Universal Studios people, but they're not. They're fanboys, girls, who are so into Harry Potter and they have annual passes and they show up there and they're like free docents. They walk around and they'll help little kids like, here's how you do it, And I guess Universal just lets them, do their thing, but it's pretty funny. All right, so the last topic I want to cover here is a little bit of a challenge, and a little bit of thinking for us. And again, I don't want you to think I think this is all new, and other people have thought about some of this before, but I'm thinking about it a lot more now, and so I want to bring it to your attention. So one thing I've been thinking about is, just VR, what we do right now, VR and AR, I'd call it just pseudo reality. Wow, I really feel like I should sing or something. We should all be swaying. Wow. Just form a circle. All right. So I would call that just regular sort of, it's magic. Magic in quotes, magic meaning that we know it's not real and it's just sort of, kind of thing that's happening. So now I think if your VR and AR things are somehow aware and they're able to affect things, things can happen in the world around you, doors can open and close, robots can come back together. I would call it a little more real reality. And then super reality is now if you have distributed sensing and control and you have all this information like my calendar, my email, so all this comes together. That's sensing, right? It's not just sensing of physical things, but sensing of virtual things of my life and my data. Think about Jarvis, right? Or Iron Man, I think is one of the things. The way in Iron Man, that's the way I think about it. So, right, my agent could be telling me, Greg, your shoe's untied, you left your window open, your mother-in-law's coming, I adjusted the thermostat for you. She'd be aware of all this because it's in my calendar, and she's looking at my shoes, your fly's undone, whatever it might be. She could even change the way I feel, right? She says, Greg, you're awfully handsome today, so she making me feel better, right? So it's important for her to influence me socially, so I believe that. I have to, all these other things have to happen. I have to be conscious that she can affect things, she's really aware of things, she's smart. So, if she says that, then I know she's smart. But, right, here's all the other stuff. My email, my coffee maker, of course, everything that's going on in my house. And like I said, think of Jarvis. So where do we, where should we be thinking about? And again, Garrett and I and others have been thinking about this. People in CS and engineering and other groups have been thinking about what could this be like. So if you have distributed things in this Internet of Things, some of them could be AR, user interface, IoT objects, some of them could be just normal IoT objects, your coffee maker, things like that. So everything in my house, every device I have is going into the cloud, it's being analyzed locally for me, right? And then I've got all these user interface side things, appearance and interaction with things over here. How I can so things are continuously being analyzed and things are happening around me. My agent will follow me around the house, right? My agent's in my phone, then my agent's in my refrigerator, my agent's at work with me, and I can talk with them. So convergence, I'm going to talk about that word in a moment, but I think it's fun to just think about, IoT, robotics, all these things. Is there something we could do together? Is there something we're missing because we're working in these individual communities that we could have an opportunity to play with, have fun, and do something meaningful if we would only pay attention and work together on those. So here's the start of my little bit of challenge. Some of you who are in the US, professors would know about the National Science Foundation has this notion of what they call convergence. And this is something very special. This is one of the 10 top ideas or the big 10 ideas they call it for money, for where NSF is going to put money, the National Science Foundation. If you read this, what they're saying is it's more than just multidisciplinary work. It's more than transdisciplinary work. It really means, in some sense, yeah, so the music is going along with this. Somebody should film me. I'll do this. So it's more. It really is. The idea is your potential for forming a new discipline. It's a new conference or new something that comes out of where there wasn't something before, and people work together. So ironically, it's sort of like you're creating a new community where people are going to potentially be isolated again. So it's like, we're going to take something from here, something here, we're going to put them together, and then they'll go off and do their own thing, and they'll be isolated. So it's like I said, I'm not saying that that's necessarily bad, that people work together in particular areas. I just think it's interesting to think about. The way I think about it, because I think about a lot of things as signal processing things, is we could get stuck in local minimums, right? And so a lot of what we do, our work, we're sort of focused in on this one area. And if we don't take the opportunity to occasionally take excursions out into these other disciplines or other areas, we sometimes miss opportunities to look at something interesting or do something compelling. So I'm going to challenge you guys, and I think this is already starting. It does happen, and it happens naturally through a lot of things we do, but to take those excursions, especially for students, to try and think about how you can go see other conferences, go visit other talks that are not in your area, and see if you can learn something. So these happen. Happens a lot in, some of you might know about Dagstuhl seminars here in Germany, in Dagstuhl and Shonen meetings in Japan and other workshops. So these are like week-long sort of retreats where researchers go and they think about things and they talk about things. And those of you who've been in them and organized them know that it is really hard, but it's really important to articulate and disseminate the ideas that you have. So we all owe it to everyone else, since those of us who go to those events are fortunate enough to be chosen to be able to go to those events, even though we pay for them. But we really owe it to the rest of the community to share what it is we think about. So then co-locating conferences, I think, really helps. So 3 thumbs up for out of 3 for SUI, WIST, ISMAR, And AWE, it's awesome that they're, it's not perfect. There is no perfect, right? If they were on top of each other, it'd be a bummer. If they're spread out, it's a bummer. So there's no perfect. There's just something that is an attempt and it works. Joint registrations are hard. Financially, it's hard to cross money between places, but I think it's worth it. We really need to work on it. This keynote is an example of complementary joint sessions. So people from WIST were invited to come here. So I love that. Last thing is just on an individual basis. I was thinking about, I'm glad Steve's here because I didn't see you before, and I was thinking Steve is one of Steve Feiner, Professor Steve Feiner from Columbia, for those of you who don't know him, is one of the people I know who's like at every place I go. He's involved, and many communities that I'm not involved in. And so he serves as a bridge between, and he's not just attends them, but Steve is involved in the leadership of many of these different conferences. So he will cross-pollinate ideas and thinking and things across these organizations, and I think that's really, really important. I do wonder about and think about if conferences should make a more proactive effort to reach out to other communities and bring one or two people to their conference to be a part of it and experience it and learn and see if there's some potential synergy. Next week at SIGGRAPH, Steve and Christian, some others know, we have somebody from SIGCHI, who's the vice president of conferences or something, is going to come and meet with us and talk to some people at ISMAR. So it's an example, again, of that. And with that, I am going to shut up and happy to sing a song or take questions, whatever you guys like, but I'm finished.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you for the talk. It was very inspiring. And do we have any questions? Anyway?
And it's okay if you don't. I'll be around. I'll be here. We can talk over a beer or hang out. Steve, yeah.
Great talk, Greg. This is less of a question and more of a kind of a comment.
Okay.
And that's that if you think about back the days of 1965 ultimate display talk that Ivan Sutherland gave, and a lot of this resonates with that. Except with the ultimate display talk, besides the fact that it was only one room, it was indoors, only one person, there were no virtual people, but there were chairs you could sit in and bullets that could kill you and handcuffs that could confine you. But he had no idea how to do any of that stuff. And it was just all this, like the ultimate display would be, and then years later, of course, there's a head-worn display and the Sword of Damocles and a bunch of very clunky, but really cool 1960s stuff. So one thing that really impresses me here is that here we are, of course, coming up in months on 50 years later, and we actually kind of know how to do some of this stuff. And so it's not just this crazy wild dream, right? But it's really something that together lots of folks in lots of different disciplines can turn into a reality at some time.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things where, again, for me, the evolution of robotics and IoT things, because it's happening independent of me, at least, I can't speak for everyone, and so, the fact that these things are coming to fruition, they do play into that vision, and nobody could do those at that time, and you're right, now we have the luxury, maybe, of starting to be able to do or think about some of these things, and I think that's just really cool, so, yeah, it's a good observation. Did you guys get that?
I'll just take this over for Dimitar. Apparently he was just going to sit down. I thought he was trying to take over. I wanted to ask you a question, Greg, because we were talking about sort of the social contract stuff and Alex's work. The question I asked earlier about that, and when you showed the virtual people sort of responding to you and her leaving the room and stuff, I just thought that was really an amazing example of this crossover where we've got these devices that can sense us, but now do we expect the same things of the virtual person? And what kind of contract do we have with them or other people's?
Right, and do we treat them similarly? So I didn't mention it, but Garrett and I and others, Jeremy at Stanford, have done studies. For lack of a better thing, we call them afterglow related studies. So if I see a virtual human sitting in this chair and I'm talking with her, and then I take off my head-mounted display, for example, I just take it off. Do I behave now as if she's still there? Or if I shut it down, if I intentionally do something in my head on a display to say turn off, Do I behave as if she's still there? So all these things that have to do with not just how she reacts to me, like you're saying, Kyle, but how I feel about her. Do I avoid her? Do I walk around her when I leave? And surprisingly enough, people do. And so, it's like, you think about it, do people subconsciously have like a separate dimension in which these people exist and they're still here? And just because I've taken off these glasses, it's like heat sensing glasses. Like I just can't see them right now, but if I put my glasses back on, they're still there. Take them off. So I think I'm not a social psychologist, which is again why I love stepping outside of my area, working with someone like Jeremy. It makes it so much fun to learn. Frank.
Thanks, Greg, for the excellent talk. I really enjoyed it. Is it on? Yeah. Also a question related to other fields which might come in our field. And I observed in the last 2 years or so that at every SIGGRAPH conference, every computer vision conference, there was a lot of machine learning and deep learning for everything except what they developed so far. I haven't seen so much machine learning in our field. So there are rarely any papers within the last 2 years at VR, VRST, which were made use of machine learning. So I want to ask you, what do you think, what would be interesting applications for machine learning? And not virtual agents, because that's pretty obvious, but what are other options in which we could use machine learning in our field?
I got to tell you before I answer the question, because I have an answer for you, but I saw a funny article somewhere once. It was like almost a cartoon, but it was where statisticians who were sort of bitter about machine learning getting all the glory and getting all the money now. There was like this little table where they said like things like, like who gets credit for inventing certain things, and it's like machine learning people. It was basically sour grapes from the statisticians. It was kind of funny. It was like, who gets all the research funding, who has all the conferences? It's the machine learning people, but we've been doing this stuff for 30 years and nobody cared, I just feel like there's so many things I mentioned earlier. The spatial user interface that's adapting to whatever I need at that moment. It needs to know what I'm doing, what I need. I tell people before, it's like, so for an agent, one of my sons has this rare, from my experience, rare ability to both pay attention and be alert and be attuned to what's happening. So if I'm doing something like, an example comes to mind is I'm changing a light switch in my house. So it's, there's some electrical stuff there, I'm paying attention to it, I'm trying not to shock myself, I think I've turned off the electricity, and I need a tool, and I kind of put my hand down and I say, Carlos, could you get me, and he's already got the thing I need. He knows from the context, he knows what I'm doing, he knows I need to remove this screw. So he's provided for me the tool right there before I even had to say anything. It's like, it is liberating, it's so amazing. Sometimes my assistant is equally proactive and prescient in that way. So machine learning, I think at least for context understanding, for recognizing, and it may be as simple as recognizing gestures. One of the things Garrett and I have talked about in the awareness avatar, AR avatar thing is, think about with Amazon Echo or something like that right now, how clunky it is. You have to name every lamp, right? You get it the first day, you get the Echo home and you program it and you set it up for this, and it says you have to give it a name, and so you go, lamp. And then, you go, okay, wow, this is pretty cool. I'm going to put it on this lamp too. And you get that and they have to name it. And you're like, I don't know, lamp 2. We're not very creative, and we don't think it through and we don't plan it out. And so now you got to remember, it's like, that's lamp 2, that's Greg's lamp, this one's floor lamp. And you're getting the weird names and everything. But shouldn't it be the case that you should be able to just say, turn off that lamp, and just gesture and point toward it and turn off? Kind of like an X1, but with my hand. I shouldn't have to do that. So maybe in machine learning, I think there's a lot to be done about context, about what's going on, and about the state of the real physical environment, including my body.
Yeah, thank you so much for the talk. I also want to point out how humble you are when you're mentioning spatial AR, which basically influenced the whole field of projection mapping. And ironically, in Berlin this week, we have the Festival of Lights, so tons of buildings are kind
here?
of, yeah. It might be on today.
Has anybody been to in Lyon? I was for the Fête de Lumière in Lyon. Is amazing too. I didn't know they had that here.
Yeah, so I think it might be on tonight still. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Sorry, Alex. Yeah,
so
thank
it
you.
was like, for me, it was like
Thank
a 30-minute walk, which is building after building with like crazy stuff.
I love it. Okay.
So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
So I was a little bit curious. There's a lot of great examples from simulation, and especially I'm interested in. You're involved in so many different fields, and I was specifically interested about the medical applications, and how you see some of these techniques being applied not only in training, but actually how they could improve medical practice and like surgery, etc., in real time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'm not sure about surgery in real time. I haven't thought about that too much, but I'll think about it. But in terms of training, I've thought a lot about it. So there's a lot of, it turns out there's great evidence that, let me back up. In the US at least, and I think this is pretty true worldwide, physicians, that is doctors, where they go through schooling and at some point they have an internship, and then they're actually practicing in a real hospital or a real setting, and there's somebody looking over their shoulder. So they're really working with somebody, but they're actually doing stuff. Nurses don't have that. For whatever reason historically, and there are many more nurses. And nurses show up at a hospital the first day they get hired, and hospitals don't trust them because they haven't had that experience. So their internship in some sense begins right then. Of course, we don't want them practicing on us, right? Nobody wants that, or practicing on our kids or our family members or something like that. So it's a difficult situation. So there's lots of investment in training nurses in particular, and there's lots of evidence that the realism of the experiential part of it plays a big role in how much of the skills they retain, and therefore the outcomes once they start practicing. And one of the things that I've been told by nurses and physicians that I work with over the years is that there are many of the technical things they can train. You can practice, you can have rubber arms, you can practice doing an IV or a central line, then you can do that over and over again, you make mistakes and it's okay. But it's learning about talking to other people, about the chaos of, let's say, an emergency room where you're on call, you show up and there's another doctor shows up and another nurse, and you don't know each other, and you don't know what your specialty is. I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know whether you're going to sit back and let me lead, whether you're going to take over. And so there are all these dynamics. Then there's chaos. Their kids screaming because it was a car accident. Somebody, the mother's upset or the father's upset. And so there's all this stuff that people just aren't used to dealing with. And the same thing happens in the military training medics, for example, who have to deal with somebody getting shot or something the first time. And you don't want them to freeze out in the field. And so you want them to get used to that. So all of this stuff we talked about, and I showed the picture there of the sort of trauma center. Garrett and I have an experiment or project going where we're working with, actually, we're very fortunate to have a relationship with the UCF Police Department at our university, who are, it's a big university. It's 68,000 students, so it's a very big, second largest university in the US, maybe first now. So a very big police force, but very forward thinking. And so we're doing some work with them to look at the use of augmented reality in our student union, which is this great big hall where students gather. So police, unlike military, have this situation where they know, quote unquote, that this could be a target for some crazy person or people someday, shopping malls, things like that, because there are a lot of people concentrated in one place. So what we're looking at is how could the police both do not just real-time simulations of a bad event happening in the union, in the student union, so having virtual innocent people, having paramedics come in and all sorts of stuff happen, but then also what, for lack of a better term, I call pre-briefing, which is they go to the union and police officers just talk about that structure and say, imagine there's a guy with a gun over here, where would you go? Where would you take cover? And they can look around, and they don't just learn specific to that place, but they learn about the types of things where you would take cover. Tables are better than this, and something else is worse than that. So AR, the ability to sense in this big area stuff that's happening, the ability to create spatialized effects around in the environment, all of that can be helpful in terms of increasing the realism of the experience, which lots of research has shown increases the effectiveness of those people in medical or military or teaching or anything else they do after that. I hope that kind of answered the first question.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I was also curious a little bit more. So this is training before the actual event or the skill is needed.
Right.
And maybe it's easier to talk about that from a medical standpoint, but the nurse that needs to exercise these skills, is there a way, as you see it, to shorten that training loop by basically have the technology as a real-time feedback loop while it's happening, like a digital support system? So you're training in situ.
That's a great idea. Boy, I mean, it'd be interesting to talk to Nasir Nawab about this a little bit to see, because he would probably have a better sense of, for those of you who don't know, he's a professor at TU Munich, and at Johns Hopkins University in the US. So he goes back and forth teaching at both places, and his focus area is AR in medicine. So it happens to be AR, but which is not VR, which is not this, which is not that. So two things come to mind. One is, it's not exactly what you're asking, but I'll say it anyway. Garrett and I have another project where we're working on, because I had forgotten about it. Do you guys know what moulage is? The word moulage, the French word, means like fake wound or fake injury. So if you put ketchup on me and something else, you can make it look like I'm hurt and bleeding or something. That would be called moulage. It's this makeup that essentially makes me look injured. So one of the things we're working on are, I assume you either know or could imagine what I mean when I say fake barf. Little rubberized pile of something that could be like a wound that you put on your arm, and that has sensors and actuators inside it, so that you can actually, if I look down with my AR headset, I can lock on to that object because it's got markers on it, active or passive, and so I can see blood coming from that. If I apply pressure to it, it can sense that I'm applying pressure, so it can reduce the blood flow, which changes the physiology of the patient and changes the visual aspects of it. So that's bringing some of those things into the training. The real-time thing, the only experience I have, Alex, that was a surprising experience to me was, and maybe the biggest challenge for anything related to your last question, is trust. And so I assume there are certain things that are less critical and I can trust them more. But I did an experiment with Henry Fuchs and some others years ago on telepresence for medical people. So it wasn't the system was going to do anything for it. It was a real human was going to, it was 3D telepresence was the idea. You'd have multiple cameras watching while, if you're a paramedic, you're doing something really sensitive. It happened to be a cricothyrotomy. You're putting an airway in someone's throat. And it's something that most paramedics and EMTs in the US don't do very often, and they probably don't have very much training. And if they don't do it, the person's going to die right there. And then they're afraid to do it because they're afraid they're going to kill the person because they don't know how to do it. So the idea was you could have a 3D viewpoint, live, reconstructed 3D. A person back at the hospital, a nurse or a physician, could be watching and coaching you, saying, that's right, it's okay, that's expected, now's the time to do it, first of all. Second of all, now put your hand there, do you feel it? You're good. So kind of comforting you. And we thought, oh, this is going to be great. It turns out the paramedics in the study we did, 100 paramedics, by far didn't like the system because they were afraid they wouldn't trust it. It wasn't that they didn't trust the doctors or the nurses. They didn't trust that the system was providing the context for them for what it was they were doing. So they're looking at it as, and when we talked to them, they said things like, the patient's life is in my hands. That's the way they think about it. This patient's going to die if I don't do the right thing. You're 1,000 miles away telling me what I should do, but you really don't understand the whole situation, and or I'm afraid you don't. And so I'm probably going to do what I think is the right thing in the end anyway, and not listen to you. So I wonder about those real-time aids when it comes to something. It depends on the medical circumstances, if it's something really critical. I do know people use, obviously, in situ. I have a friend who's a surgeon at a children's hospital in Orlando, and he's pretty forward-thinking. They do a lot of AR-based surgery, and they do planning into everything of the head. Like he's a maxillofacial cranial surgeon, so he reconstructs head bone, and so which is really hard for me to watch some of it, but even in pictures. But they'll use it in real time, and they'll watch using AR essentially, which amazed me, because again, that's sort of one of these things that's like totally outside of, it wouldn't surprise me to go to ISMAR and see that presented as a paper, but to go to this hospital and see these people just using it, it's like, wow, it has arrived, or something like, people are actually using it. But they're doing things like, he was telling me about, like if they have to drill, and they don't want to drill too far. I mean, I have this problem when I'm drilling in my wall in my house. So I think it's probably more important to the kid's head that you stop drilling at a certain depth. And so they'll be using AR and different sensing of the drill and all sorts of things to help them go just as deep as they need to, but no deeper than that. That's the closest I'm aware of. Someone else in the room might have some other knowledge on that. But.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. They're little mundane things. Garrett and I got approached by Orlando fire department. Paramedics, the chief of all the paramedics, is concerned about, and this is really sort of an IoT-ish mundane thing, but they have boxes with medicine in them, and they keep them in the ambulance all day long, and certain medicines have to remain a certain temperature, and they don't know. This is where you learn about the real world so many things are eye-opening. It's like they have these boxes. They got to know if the temperature goes below a certain level, then they throw the medicine away. They replace it. And of course, we're thinking, oh, just put a wireless thermometer in there, And they're thinking, we have no money and we don't know how to do this. And so it's like, how do we do this without money? And how do we? So it's eye-opening to sometimes when, and I've seen the same thing with the military, where you go in and you have this great idea for something big, and I'm sure Steve and Tobias, and we all see this, and they're worried about something very small, very mundane. So that's when getting out of your field. Sometimes it's hard. You have to find the right person who's under the right circumstances, who's both able and willing to spend time with you and give up sort of on some of their own desires and be flexible and be patient and invest in that relationship. Anyway. I talked you to death. All right. And the music stopped.
There you go.
I should say. Like I said, I'm here, all night. I'll leave tomorrow, but I'm here tonight. So I'm very happy to chat if anybody wants to at some point. I'll be around.
No more questions. Let's all give a round of applause to Greg Welch.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, I don't know.